Hello, everybody. All right. So we don't have any advanced questions. Let's talk quickly about what I put in the suggested listening. All right. Let me pull this up real quick. So I can see what we have. So far, this is the weirdest thing. Makes me think I did something wrong in setting it up. I mean, technically, because there's nobody here. Hello, hello. Echo, echo, echo. So what I'm doing now is I want to talk about. Okay, so I remember what one of the listenings, the non-trumpet listening was Milonga, like Milonga the style. Milonga the style. Why is it not loading up? Load up, load up. And hello, Karen. Nice to see you. Milonga is like a sort of like a tango. A traditional dance style. It's a little more free. You know, I do believe that we should be listening to stuff that's not necessarily trumpet, but we should have a balance. You know, I do listen to a lot of trumpet music, but I also listen to a lot of the other stuff too. Now, what I will tell you is I don't think that all listening is always appropriate and that all listening is always beneficial. I don't believe that. So, for example, if you're listening to death metal, I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to death metal. How much is it helping your trumpet? I think probably not. I mean, so, and if it, I can't imagine that it would help, if that makes sense. I can't imagine that it would help nearly as much as different kinds of music. So anyway, that's why that's there. I thought it was very nice sounding, and I added it. The trumpet one, which one? Waiting for this to load up. It's not loading up. Let's hit refresh. See if that helps. And yeah, here we go. So what I put for the trumpet one was, I should have done this in advance. Oh yes, the Gansch. That's some beautiful music there, right? He's just a wonderful player. He's just a wonderful, wonderful player. So that's why that's there, because he's just an awesome player, and that's some beautiful music he's playing. I think it's from a project he's trying to promote. I think Thomas Gansch, right? I can't pronounce his name properly. But yeah, I don't know if it's an album project or if it's a concert tour or what, but obviously he's putting a project together and he's promoting that. And it's very, very nice. So why don't I also mention some news? What do we have news-wise? I finished a new brass quintet this week. I'm calling it. Now, what's interesting about this brass quintet is that I started off trying to write a trumpet duet. Now, our new thing with the duets is that we write the duet to be published first, and then we take a bunch of them and we put them in book form. And so I knew this trumpet duet was going to be part of this next book project that I'm working on. The third duet book in the series. The first one was 20 trumpet pioneer duets. The second was 20 trumpet tyro duets. This one won't be 20 because I have already more than 20. I'm thinking probably 32. That's what I'm shooting for. 32 trumpet player duets. And I'm expecting that one to be one of the best-selling books when it's done, because it's going to have fun duets in it. It's going to be educational. It's going to be it's covers so many bases, but it's for the highest note in the book is going to be G above the staff. So I really expect that. You know, when I've been publishing these other books, the duet books, right, the hymn duets, and some of the other ones, I get complaints. They say, "Can you write something that has lower notes in it?" Well, this is going to be sort of like that, except it's not hymns. So, and you know, the thing is, not all of my stuff has high notes in it anyway. Anyway, so I was writing this new duet, and the melody. Anyway, so because I wanted to take it somewhere, I wanted the harmonies to make sense. I didn't want, see what happens a lot of times, I'm saying this based on my own past, okay? And I hear the way I used to write in other people's writing, and I'm not going to say who because that would sound like a insult, okay? Hello, Gabriel, nice to see you. It would sound like an insult, so I'm not saying that. I'm not going to say who it is. But the way I used to write is I didn't care what the harmonies were. And I would just write what sounds good to me. And the problem with that is that those kind of compositions never have the kind of structure. And they sound good as long as you're zoomed in looking at the composition narrowly, like only looking at the very smallest part of the piece. You say, oh, that's pretty sounding. But when you zoom out and look at the big picture, there's nothing there because the way our minds operate when we're composing is if we just go with what sounds pretty, it's impossible to have that second level structure without actually thinking about it. Anyway, so my point is, to create that structure, I added a tuba part to this trumpet duet. The intention was to create a tuba part that gives me that structure, and then, you know, finish the trumpet part, then remove the tuba part, publish it as a duet. And that worked, by the way. When I was finished with all this, I went back and made a duet out of it. So the original idea, and the consequential idea was successful. What was surprising was that the deeper I got into this two trumpets, one tuba thing, was that I started liking that so much that my original thought was maybe I could publish it as a trio, two trumpets and one tuba. And maybe I will still do that, because I could take the duet, add the tuba part, and there would be nothing missing. It would work that way. So it'd be like an optional tuba part, but I would sell it as a trio. I haven't thought about that yet. But I did go full over to that side and say, oh, you know what? Let's just make this a brass quintet. So I switched gears about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. It's hard for me to keep track of that stuff. I switched gears about 2 weeks ago and just started writing it as a quintet. I took some of the second trumpet stuff, put it down in the trombone part. I did have to move some of the harmonies around and stuff like that to make it work. Um, and it's a nice brass quintet. It's easy. It's supposed to, the third level. The third level in my system is basically freshman, sophomore, high school level. So, you know, I didn't want the other parts to be too entirely uh, difficult compared to the trumpet parts. So it is sort of like a high school level brass quintet, which I don't write a lot of that for brass quintet. When I write for brass quintet, I'm thinking professional level. So it's kind of nice to have something that's not as hard. The hardest part about this piece is the rhythms. But as far as chops goes, I don't think anyone's going to have trouble. I do think maybe that the trombone, there's a part where the trombone might have trouble with the slide because I have the part so low. I haven't tried it yet. I might put an optional 8VA over that section and see what that sounds like. But yes, as a quintet, it works, and it's very nice. I like it. It's called Paid to Play. It's a very happy sounding piece. But after the quintet was done, I went back to see if I could extract a trumpet duet out of it. So there was one spot in the piece where I shifted and put the melody on the French horn and the trombone. So I copied it and pasted that up into the trumpet parts and to make the duet work. And there were some notes I had to change. Not a lot, but like for example, there's one place where it goes da 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 dum. I had to make it go da 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 dum instead of up. I made it go down. Or vice versa. I can't remember which now. But yes, now I have a separate duet, a separate quintet. I might make a trio with the two trumpets and a tuba. Yeah, so that's some news for the week. What else? I had a gig on Saturday. You know, years ago, I decided I was not going to do that anymore. Um, I don't like taking out of town gigs if they don't put us up for the night because it's so dangerous driving home. But this one was over at 11, so San Antonio getting out at 11. I got home at about 3 o'clock, 3:30. Um, it was tough. It was a rough ride, but I got home. So that was with a party band. Basically, I think it was a corporate Christmas party or something. What else happened this week? Anybody got questions? I don't mean to just talk and bump you guys out of asking questions. Hello, Gabriel. Gabriel says, Eddie, about practicing duets, is it a good idea to record one part on notation app and on PC and playing with it? And what lines should I practice more, the top or the bottom? Let's answer the last question first. You should do both equally. So when I assign a duet, and Karen knows this because we've been doing duets in her lesson, even though it's a remote lesson, she's doing both parts. But yes, you do both parts. You take both parts seriously. you want to be equally proficient on the first and the second part. The first question, is it a good idea? Absolutely, that's a good idea. You know, my first album, and when I say my first album, I can say first album as a leader, only there's no other people on it. So I had this idea to, the more I dug up these old duets, the more I wanted to record them. And you know, a little background there. There were some famous albums, and they were ultra famous before because nobody was doing this, where one person was doing everything on the album. And I don't remember who it was. They weren't famous, but it was, you know, they were up there enough for people to go, wow, right? So the drums, the bass, the guitar, the piano, the singing, it's sort of like what um, James Morrison, I think is his name, the one that he's got a whole big band. And I think the only, hello, David. I think the only instrument he's not playing is the drums or something like that. They're one of the rhythm section instruments he's not playing. Everything in that big band recording is him playing. He plays all the instruments, trumpet, trombone, all the saxes, piano. So the album that I'm talking about now was an album that more like a pop or a rock album. And I thought, you know what, there's no reason why I can't do something like that. And just to get my put my toe in the water, so to speak, I made this first album. I call it Vintage Trumpet Treasures. Vintage because all the recordings, all the pieces are from 100 years ago or longer. And then the treasures is just because this is beautiful, beautiful music. I gave it to a friend of mine, and I told him, I said, don't listen to this like a musician. Put the album on and go about your day and just let it run in the background. And he got back to me later. He says, you know what? You were right. It's great to have that music on in the background. And that's, you know, we make the mistake of calling that music classical music. That was not classical music when it was written. That was popular music. Remember, before radio, before TV, people used to get around the piano and sing songs with the piano for fun. They would play instruments for fun. And if you came up, you know, with a book of new duets for two trumpet players, that was something that people would do for pleasure. It wasn't some art that they were learning, like historically. That was in their time. So I wasn't approaching this recording as if it was classical music. I was approaching this recording as a trip back in time. It's called Vintage Trumpet Treasures. Let me see if I can grab one of those. Okay, unfortunately, I don't have one right here. So anyway, my point is, when I started recording those trumpet duets, it's a whole album of 100-year-old trumpet duets. Beautiful pieces of music. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to look it up. I'll do a real quick search for you. Yeah, so if you haven't heard this album, I encourage you to check it out. There's a version of it on my channel. Okay, here's the track, I mean the playlist. How do I? Okay, here. That's not the playlist. That's just one. Anyway, I was going to put a link, but I don't know how to put the link for the whole playlist. Oh, here it is. I got it. Oh, no, I don't. What am I doing? How do I stop that? Okay, stop. Oh my! My day has been like that. Anyway, look it up. Vintage Trumpet Treasures. I'll spell it here. And try to do with it what I said to that friend of mine. Put it on the background, and go about your day. I think you will enjoy the music because it wasn't meant to be like scrutinized like a classical thing. It's not about how good it is. It's about how beautiful the music is, right? And anyway, so when I started recording that stuff, I learned so much by doing both the second part and the first part. I learned so much about ensemble playing. You know, I remember I played a gig right after I finished recording that album. I played a gig with the Texas Brass and Thomas Bacon. You guys should know that name. Thomas Bacon was playing horn in the brass quintet. He's a quasi-famous French hornist. And him and I made a connection musically. And he even said to me, he made a comment to me on one of the breaks about how well we were locking in together on this brass quintet gig. And it was because part of that was because I was recording that album and I was starting to hear stuff in my playing that I had never heard before. So yes, I do think making the recordings of duets is extremely beneficial. And to take it, I'll tell you what I used to do is I used to do that with trumpet quartets and quintets back when I was in junior high. I was recording layers with because my father was in Vietnam and Korea on different tours, and the way we communicated, we had a cassette player there and a cassette player here, and we would send cassettes back and forth. Well, when he came back, he brought his cassette player. Now I've got two to play with. So I would play here, and then I would play and record with this. This one would record, this one would play, and I'd play with this one. And that's how I tracked. I was tracking recordings back before I even knew what that was, with two cassettes. And it was actually, what happens when you do it that way is you get noise, right? I had no way to filter out noise, but I could hear what the composition sounded like. That when I first started composing, I know I'm on a very long tangent. When I first started composing, that's how I checked what it sounded like. Is I would record it multi-tracking with two separate cassette players. That's funny, right? Anyway, so even though I've been doing that like my whole life, when I did this That's not what I was saying. I was telling you, you know, this is something that you benefit from if you go that far, is to not just play with yourself, but also record the two parts and make your own recordings of the duet. That's an excellent way to do it. Anyway, um, so that's the long about way of saying yes, go for it. Okay. David says, how long will it take me to get back to where I was in trumpeting after taking at least 4 months off? I'm going to say it should take 2 or 3 days. Now, most people will disagree with me on that. And it's not true for everybody. You know, when I go to South Africa, I touch the horn so little. We go for at least 4 weeks. I touch the horn so little, it stays in the case almost the whole time. I will pull it out and play for people. Now, this last time is a little bit of an exception because that first week I was part of a jazz festival. So I did have the horn on my lips. But previous times, the first time I went to South Africa, I think it was for 5 weeks. And I think I practiced maybe 2 or 3 times in that 5 weeks. I had a gig the night I came back, and I had no trouble on that gig. And then people say, well, yes, you'll have no trouble, but what about the next day? I had no trouble the next day. I had no trouble the day after, the day after, the day. When you take time off, it's more of a mindset than it is a physical problem. Now, let's talk about the things that lead to this not being a physical problem. The fact that I do a physical trumpet pyramid warm-up or a physical trumpet pyramid routine is part of what makes it possible for me to take time off and not have to have a comeback period. Because when you think about, and this is what I mean by a mindset, right? If your daily routine is a complete rebuilding anyway, and that's how mine works. My routine is a complete rebuilding. You're starting from scratch every day, and you are rebuilding your chops from scratch every day. If that's how you approach practicing every day, what's the difference between that and coming back a week later, 3 weeks later, 5 weeks later, a month later, 2 months? Oh, I said 5 weeks. 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It doesn't matter. And I've seen this not just in my own playing, I've seen it in my students as well. Here's the problem with it, though. And you guys have heard me say this before. Because so much of what we do is mental. Now, even the physical stuff is mental. Being able to play high is mental. Getting a great sound is mental. It's not physical. And because it's mental, it's also fragile. I'm going to say that one more time for dramatic effect. Because the physical abilities we have on the trumpet are mental, they are also fragile. What do I mean by fragile? Fragile in the sense that if we think a certain way, it can all go away. It's so fragile. These abilities that we have, our endurance, our range, our beautiful sound, just the way we think can ruin it all. Or the flip side of that is equally true. If we change the way we think, we can sound beautiful, we can have better range, we can have better endurance. Now, I'm not suggesting that just by believing you can do it, it's just gonna, that's not the kind of mental I'm talking about. The kind of mental I'm talking about is like this daily rebuilding thing that I'm saying. Okay, if you rebuild daily, if you rebuild daily, then the rebuilding is just built into your attitude. And it doesn't take any time to come back. You know what we think, and this is what I mean by fragile. We think that when you take time off, your lips get weak and that you lose range. Now, there is a scenario that you would lose range after taking time off. If the way you play depends on inflammation, you know, the swelling that happens in the lip. If you play that way, then when you take the time off, the swelling goes away, you can't play again. Your range will go down. If the way you play is this right here swells up and gets stiff, and that's how you get the higher notes, is because it's stiff. Stiff tissue vibrates faster than flexible, fleshy tissue. If that's how you play, then how long it takes to get back is an issue of how long does it take you to get that swelling back in your lips. And here's why those guys will tell you that you have to practice consistently every day. Because what can happen, the danger of, if the type of embouchure you use is the swelling in the center of your lips, if that's how you play, and there are people that play that way, it's not uncommon. I'm going to go as far as to say there are probably more trumpet players that play with swelling than there are that play without it. Okay? So if that's how you play and you let the swelling go down, getting the swelling back is dangerous because you might overshoot it. You might undershoot it. If you overshoot it, you're looking at the possibility of damaging your chops. If you undershoot it, you get to the gig and you can't play. So the only way someone who has that kind of swelling can continue a trumpet career is to play the same amount every day. The whole point of your practice sessions is to regulate the swelling in your lips. And when you look at it that way, all of the traditional sayings that they have about practice become true. About how you have to practice every day. You can't take a day off. If you take a day off, it's your first step towards sounding bad. It's 2 days off. Now you're having real problems. 3 days off and it's really, really bad. So yeah, I've stopped playing with swelling in 1985. Because I don't play on a swollen embouchure, I can take time off and come back. I don't lose anything. This idea that you get atrophy, those are people misdiagnosing swelling. When the swelling goes away, that's not atrophy. Because it wasn't your muscles that were playing that note anyway. It was the swelling in your lips that was playing that note. When the swelling goes away, that's not the muscles giving up. That's your lip going back to normal. I had a trumpet student quit one time because I was talking about this swelling, and the mom was so concerned about swelling in the lips. You know, if you live in fear, I'm sorry, all kinds of stuff is gonna go bad for you. Anyway, David says that is a great way of thinking about it. Good, I'm glad you like that. All right, so can I play the Mixolydian scale? So I'll play you the Mixolydian scale on C, starting on C. Let me do it this way so you see my fingers. C Mixolydian. How about G Mixolydian? Okay, that's Mixolydian. If you want to think of it the way some people think of it, it's a flatted 7. Okay, I don't teach modes when I teach improvisation. Just so you know, I write a lot of stuff that's Mixolydian when I compose, and I do a lot of Mixolydian improvisation, but I don't teach Mixolydian scale as a way to improvise the way that most jazz educators teach. I don't do that stuff. And the reason for that is because of the tonalization studies. If you do the tonalization studies on the Mixolydian scale, let's do that, right? I'm going to do the first tonalization study on the F major scale, then I'll do it on C Mixolydian. That's the first tonalization study. If I do the C Mixolydian tonalization study, watch this. I keep passing it. Anyway, you would end on C. It's exactly the same study. All I'm changing is starting on a different note. What I just did now, it was the same exercise twice, just starting on a different note. So I don't teach the modes in my lessons. I think the students should know the modes intellectually. I don't think they should have to be able to play them like a scale. And I don't think they should ever say to themselves, this is a G7 chord, let me play G Mixolydian over it. I don't think they should ever do that. The way I want them to approach that is, this is G7 chord, let me play the language that I know that's in C. That's how I want them to play that. Because if you're playing a scale, if where your mind is that you're playing a scale, then you are not going to be conscious of the language. Anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that, but yes. Gabriel says, Eddie, I have troubles in descending in fast passages. I can go up fast, but when I go down, I often miss the notes, especially if they have same fingering position. Also, if I try very slow. Okay, so that normally has to do, let's back up a little bit. We were taught when we were children or beginners that you make your lips firm for the high notes and we loose them up for the low notes. This is bad thinking because loosening is not a thing. You can't loosen your muscles. especially if they're being pinned down by the trumpet mouthpiece. You can't loosen that. And I had this problem. That was what you're describing there, Gabriel, is the very first problem I had after I figured all this stuff out. The very first problem I had was that I called it sagging. The note, when I was trying to go from C to G, the note would sag. It would right. I couldn't just make that note go down. But that's because I was still thinking firm for the high notes, loose for the low notes. That doesn't work. So, and now I know it's not just it's not just here. It's also the teeth. It's also the tongue position. All these things have to move together. But let's talk about the lips though. The embouchure has to move to a position. And this is one of the benefits. People say, well, I even got a comment this week on my lip buzz video. The guy says, why do you do this? This is one of the reasons why we do the lip buzz. Because when you go, that's not loosening the lips. That's the lips going from this position to that position to that position. Okay, so there's a very specific, it's not about loose or tight, it's about in or out more. I'm not pushing the lips together to get higher and then loosening them. I'm pulling them in tighter to get and out. So that if we look at it, I'm going to exaggerate it now. I'm going to do arpeggios and then I'm going to go down into the tuba register. Look at how the lips, the contour of the lips changes. Right? I'm now changing the lips all the way out. Out for low, in for high. Out for low, in for high. And when the note just sticks to that note, I think most of the time it's because we're sending the wrong signals to the body. We're thinking relax. That's a more relaxed note. Relax your body. No, that's your body has to go to that position. You know, I had a long time ago, someone in a master class, I don't remember who it was, said playing trumpet should be just like piano, hitting that note, hitting that note. It should be like that. When you know where that position is, that's what it becomes. So yes, the lip buzz helps with that. Mouthpiece buzz helps with that. And if it's on a very specific song, that's what you want to do. Where's my... I like that brass buzzer. You guys remember when we had Carl here talking about the brass buzzer? Okay, I don't have mine right here. I like the brass buzzer because you can play the song and then you can play. And just by matching the pitch, you will put your lips and your teeth and all that into the right position. Then you go back to the trumpet. And back again. Does that make sense? That's a big part of fixing those problems if they're happening specifically in a piece of music. We don't do that on lisplers and stuff like that because the routine has that all built into it. With the lip slurs and all the stuff in the routine, those exercises are in that order to address this problem. Okay, let's see. Eddie, do you have, this is from Dave Stubbington. Eddie, do you have any advice on approach to begin improvising in jazz? Yes, I do. I want to say first that you don't try to follow rules. It's not about rules, okay? And I think the worst way to learn how to play jazz, especially as a beginner, is to try to learn the chords. The learning chords takes a couple of years just to learn the chords. So you don't have to do that before you learn how to improvise. So forcing yourself to learn to read chords in the context of your improvisation is going to slow you down. You do need to learn to read chords. You need to have the technique of that the chords have, and I have a way of approaching that. It doesn't help with your improv until years later. But if you do what I what I teach, then you will end up with the technique and an understanding of the harmonies that you couldn't possibly get from trying to cram it at the beginning of your improv. So that's the first thing I said, don't chords. But you also have to find songs that don't go through all those different chords. So I recommend songs like Autumn Leaves. So you can play Autumn Leaves. They have it in two different keys. There's B flat concert and G concert. If you learn Autumn Leaves first in B flat concert, then you can just improvise in the B flat concert scale over that song. You don't have to know what the chords are. Go to YouTube, put a Autumn Leaves in B flat backing track on, play the song, and then improvise in the key of B flat concert, or C. And then there's this thing that I teach, and I've heard other people teaching it as well. I would like to think I made it up. It's also possible that other people made it up too. I don't normally do that, but I just checked my email. And I got an email from Malcolm McNabb. I'll have to read that. I hope it's not just an ad. Anyway, I don't know why I even did that. So there's this exercise that I teach, and like I said, I made it up, but I've heard other people teach it as well. It's possible that they got it from me somehow, but it's also possible that they also made it up too, because it makes sense. You start improvising with just let's say we're doing Autumn Leaves, put your Autumn Leaves on the backing track and just improvise with one note. I like to use G or F. If we're in the key of C, G or F. Play that through the whole track. Then add one note. We're going to add F. Okay, after we have one note, we add another note. We add A. Then you can add E. Now, all the time that you're doing this, so you could do what I'm doing now without the track, and everything you play will sound okay. We want to do that with the track because while you're doing this, you want to try to lean towards stuff that sounds good. So that brings me to the only rule I have when it comes to what you should play in your improv, is that you should think it sounds good. You should be shooting towards something that you think sounds good. That's the only rule. There's no rule about what notes you should play. There's no rule about this, no rule about that. It should sound good to you. Now, it takes a while to get to where it does sound good, right? So anyway, so yes, when you're doing this, I call this the improvisation expansion. As you expand and include more notes, you're not just playing notes, you're playing with the track. You're looking for notes in that little sequence that you have that fit the chords, and the chords are going to change as you go, right? So you're looking for notes within that sequence that will fit with the different sections of the song. In other words, I'm trying to help you play by ear. I want you to play by ear using the notes that you have until you reach all the notes that you have in the C major scale. Now, there are some other notes in the chords in that song, but they're not absolutely mandatory to play. A better player would play them. I play them. But when we're talking about a beginner, we want the beginner to sound good. That's priority number one. We're not looking for it to be right. We're looking for it to sound good. Because the making it be right thing is an abstract academic thing. Sounding good is a music thing. Anyway, so that's how I teach beginner improvisation. Now I have a sequence of songs that I go through. But yes, that's how I approach it. I actually have a very standard, I call it a canon, a jazz canon. I have a standard jazz canon that I put whether it doesn't matter how advanced they are, I put them all through the same, because everybody's needs to know those tunes anyway. And if we just do 1 week on each tune, we're still getting something done. So it doesn't matter how advanced they are, they all start on that tune. They all start on Autumn Leaves. Now, I pick tunes for that reason, because they don't have key changes in it. It's kind of hard to find a jazz tune that doesn't have key changes. So just because you can sound great on those tunes doesn't mean you're a jazz player yet, because you pick up another tune, it's like going through 5 different keys, and you can barely just play one, you know? So that's a problem. But at least you can sound good on a few tunes now. And if those are the tunes that I pick are tunes that will be playable in a jam session. So after your first assignment, when you finish that first tune in my lesson, you're ready to go to a jam session, as long as they're open, right? A lot of jam sessions, they don't let you just play whatever tune you want to play. I've heard stories like that. That's not how it is in Houston, but I've heard places otherwise that they're kind of I don't know, competitive, I guess, would be a word. Mean would be another word. But here in Houston, the jam sessions are very open and friendly. And if that's the only song you know, they're happy to have you play it. They might put you at the end. If they think you might suck or something, they might put you at the end, but you'll get to play. So, anyway, but yes, after just one assignment, you're ready to go to the jam session. That's how I approach it. I want you to sound good now. We'll get to that other stuff later. Unfortunately, just like everything else that works that way, there are people that get stuck on that and can't advance because their dopamine levels are already charged at this level, and they have no desire to move on to the next level of playing. That's a little frustrating for me as a teacher, but yeah, I would like, so that's supposed to be the beginning. I call it horizontal playing. It's very much influenced, believe it or not, it's very much influenced by George Russell, um, because he teaches those 5 different ways to play. This is the easiest way to play. Why not start there? The hardest way to play, out of the 4 different ways to play, the hardest of the 4 is the way that the traditional jazz education people teach. So, I hope that makes sense. Anyway, Karen says, I don't know if my lips swell or not. She says, what do you think about the Warburton Pete? I have one. I used to have a silver one. Someone took it and never gave it back. So now I'm not going to get silver anymore. I'll get the plastic ones. But yeah, I used to have a very nice silver one. I enjoyed it. I keep, here's the thing. I don't do it all the time. I keep it so that I can show the students. There are times when it's appropriate. There are other times when it's not appropriate. I don't think it should be part of your everyday practice. And when I say everyday, I mean, I don't think it should be just par for the course. Everybody should do it. I don't believe that. I also don't believe that, like I told you, I go to South Africa and I can go 5 weeks without playing. And I don't do stuff like that. I don't feel like I need to keep my chops in shape. Okay, so I don't do that. There are, to tell you the truth, the most time I do it now is when I'm demonstrating it to a student. But there are times when the student should have it. And that said, being very specific with you, Karen, I wouldn't have a problem with you getting it and using it. I prefer that my students do it at night after everything they're done with trumpet playing. Don't do it before you play, do it after you play, and then go to bed. That's how I like to use it. David says, have you ever collaborated with other trumpet YouTubers to plan to? I think it would allow you to reach a wider audience. Yeah, you know what? If that's how I was thinking, I would probably do that. I'm not trying to reach a broader audience, a wider audience. Um, so I'm not against collaborating. My motivation to do that would be entirely unlike what the reason why other people would do that. I'm by nature an introvert. I don't do well socially. I think doing projects like that is a great way for someone like me to be social without having to actually go and do it in person. so like there's a few things I wouldn't mind doing, like doing the multi-track videos or interviews or both or all kinds of stuff. I'm all for that. Um, I'm not eager to do that, to pursue that. I mean, I'm not eager to pursue that. I'm not looking for a wider audience. That said, I celebrate when there's more people. Okay, I celebrate when there are more people that are doing this, checking out my stuff. I'm happy about that. But to me, it's never been about the numbers. I'm not trying to be, this is not a advertising scheme for me. This is my way of helping people out. And it's, when I first started YouTube, the whole purpose of it was to put stuff up online for my students. Then I noticed, well, hey, I can also do demos of my compositions. And I understand how people think, right? I understand that people would say, well, don't you want to sell more compositions? Don't you want to have more students? Don't you want to, because that's how the whole world thinks. I don't think like that. My, how do I say this? I don't mean to get overly religious here, but my welfare, my financial welfare is not in the hands of the public. My financial welfare is not in the hands of an employer. My financial welfare is not even in the hands of my own making. My financial welfare is in God's hands, only God's hands. I'm not compelled to why am I talking about financial welfare is because that's the purpose of having a wider audience, is so that you can sell more stuff. And I don't want to sell more stuff. I want the people who need my stuff to get it. That's it. And I just trust God to make sure that the people who need it will find a way to get it. Does that make sense? So people have asked me stuff like that before in the past. Um, there's a lot of YouTube stuff I don't do. There's a lot of sales stuff I don't do. I've read, here's the funny part, right? I have read more sales books than you can probably imagine. Out of every trumpet player in the world, I've probably read more sales books than any other trumpet player in the world. I might be exaggerating, maybe, who knows? I've read a lot of sales books. 90% of what I've read, I will not do, because the way I see, in the Christian faith, there's a sect of Christians that believe that anytime you manipulate people, it's witchcraft. If you make people do something they wouldn't have done anyway, it's witchcraft. And that 95% of what I've learned in the sales books would fall under the category of witchcraft. And I will not practice that. I will not do those things. And I apologize if that offends anybody in any way. I'm not saying that salespeople are witches. I'm saying I can't do that stuff because it's against what I believe. I will not do stuff just to make a sale. I will not do stuff just to have a wider audience. That said, I love people. I had a student tell me one time, he said, it was his first lesson. At the end of the lesson, he says, "You are a very giving person." Well, I'm going to tell you this. That giving is not from me, it's God channeled through me. That giving that he was sensing was my love for him, God's love for him channeled through me. I love people with the strength that God loves people. I give because God gives. I know this is starting to sound like a sermon. I didn't mean it to sound like a sermon, but I'm trying to explain because it sounds like a contradiction. Yes, I would do a collaboration. I'm very happy to do a collaboration because I love people. I would love to collaborate with anybody if I have time. But my motivation would probably not be the same as their motivation. I have had people do this to me before. I don't mean this. I'm not talking about the collaboration thing. I have had people that they see that I've got a presence. Let's call it a presence, right? Like here in Texas, I wrote the All-State Jazz A2s going back 10 years. Not all of them, but a lot of them, right? Um, and just stuff. I'm on the All-State drum album. I think they're using a different one now, but for almost 20 years, they used the same drum album, and I played all 5 trumpet parts on every chart on that recording. We did that whole session in one day. That was a lot of playing. Anyway, so yes, and then the YouTube stuff, and then the composition stuff, and the books, and all that. So I'm not famous. God forbid, I don't even want to be famous. But there are people that see me as a way for them to further themselves. If they can be in with me, then they have a connection to all that stuff that I've been connected to. And you can tell when it happens, right? Because they're not interested in you. There isn't that what I'm talking about with this God channeling his love through me. You can tell they're not doing that. They don't love me. They want something. And there are times when I just know that's going on, and I put the brakes on. I don't let it go in that direction. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So yeah, I would be open to collaborating, but I would have to make sure that people know that I'm not just trying to play the game. Gabriel says, Eddie, I have an odd question. Where are all the pictures on the wall, especially the Salah? I just took all that stuff down because I wanted to have that as a backdrop for videos, because it was very difficult for the videos. Anyway, so they're all on the floor in the other room. So we have over here some open space there. I might put some of those there. And there's that one small side wall right there. I can put some there. But yes, I wanted to have a clean backdrop for. So when I repainted the room, well, let's say that first. I took them down so I could paint. That was the original reason. I wanted to paint that wall. Because it was getting dirty. So I repainted, and then I just thought, this was back when I wanted to do interviews. Boy, that was like pulling teeth, wasn't it? Oh, you wouldn't know, but and behind the scenes, here's your behind the scenes moment. I was trying to do interviews. So what I was talking about, the love thing, right? I wanted to share what I was doing with other people. I thought, you guys saw a couple of these. I had the Friends series. I reached 100. I have 100 free improvisation videos. And I thought, when I hit 100, why don't I just start bringing other people in to do this with me? And I invited people. Nobody will come. I invited trumpet players to come play duets. Nobody would come. I invited jazz players to come jam with me. Nobody will come. And at this point, I'm kind of, burned out on asking. Talking about the collaboration, it's kind of a drag, I don't understand why people just don't want to come out and do that. We did have a couple not interviews, but we had a couple guests on the Q and A. We had Dennis Dotson, we had Ed Johnson, Ed. Why can't I remember his name? Ed Johnson. That's right. um, we had Carl, but nobody's come to play. And so when I painted the wall, the idea was that we would bring the table in here, set it up for an interview, and have it against the blank wall. And but none of that panned out. I'm still gonna do my videos against that wall, but I'm this close to giving up on the interview thing. I'm that close to giving up on having guests jam with me. Yeah, that part of it was a little disappointing because I really thought people would be into it. Maybe they're scared. I don't know. Um, Dave says that was really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. And David McQueen says that does make sense. Okay. All right. We are over time, almost 15 minutes. Thanks for hanging out. I'm going to read that email from, I hope it's not a scam email. Even if someone's famous, if they're just trying to sell something, I don't know. Let me just say that. I told you I read literally hundreds of sales books. Maybe not hundreds, but lots and lots and lots of sales books. One thing I got from reading those sales books is that I know when people are trying to do it to me. I can tell when people are trying to manipulate me. So if I open his email and see that he's just trying to sell me something, I don't care that he's famous. That's still something I'm not interested in. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, Gabrielle says, thanks, Eddie, for your great help. It's always nice to hear you. Goodbye, all. Yes. Thank you, guys. Thanks for hanging out. God bless you. And we will see you next time. Probably not next week. We'll probably take a week off next week. Okay? All right. So also remember that we have the WhatsApp. I'll let you know in WhatsApp for sure whether we have next week or not. Okay? All right. Well, good thing. God bless you. We'll see you next time.